Alright guys, so far we have been discussing mostly the grid container properties. We have also seen few grid item properties, and those are grid area, justify self, align self, etc. But now let's see some of the more important properties which belongs to the grid items. First of all, we are going to look into how we can actually size and place our items inside our grid system. That is, for that purpose we have a few properties, and those are grid column and grid row for sizing grid items. And for placing grid items, we have grid column start, grid column end, grid row start, and grid row end. Yeah, okay, let's see from here how we can actually size our grid items. So first of all, let's have a look of our page. Okay, let's get rid of we need these items, but we will get rid of these properties. Okay, and at the same time this thing, let's get rid of the grid column also. Save this, let's have a look, give it a refresh. Perfect, we have 20 items, and let's get one heading also before this. Let's say h1 maybe. CSS grid, and to the h1 let's apply class of heading. Save this, give it a refresh. Okay, perfect. Now we will create few columns. So for that purpose, to the container let's apply gtc, that is grid template column. Yeah, and how many columns do we need? Maybe 5 with one fr. Save this, have a look. Great, we have 5 columns and 4 rows. So these rows are implicit, that you know the difference between implicit and explicit. Okay, first of all, let's target one item here, maybe item 4, and let's apply a width of something, maybe 500 pixel. Save this, now give it a refresh. Okay, so this is the item 4 to which we have applied width of 500 pixel. So here, first of all, obviously we can size our items using width properties, and we can apply whatever the values you want to apply, maybe in pixel, maybe in em, rem, percentage, etc, etc, that you know. But here we are talking about the individual items, and inside this you might have seen we have applied 500 pixel for the 4th item, and similarly each and every item in this column got the width of 500 pixel. So I want to discuss here that how actually this fr unit works. I've already discussed this fr unit, but let's talk something more about this, how actually it works. Fr unit is a free space unit. So how does free space gets calculated? So the free space gets calculated inside the container or inside the grid system. Before dividing the free space to the individual item, first of all, what grid does, whenever you create columns and then you define any width in hard unit, maybe in pixel, so first of all what it will do, it will assign the width of 500 pixel to the items to which we have applied. Maybe for the 4th column we have applied width of 500 pixel, then we have applied a gap of 3 rem. So 3 rem here, here, here. So 500 pixel plus 3 rem, 3 rem, 3 rem, 3 rem. So first of all, this thing will be assigned to the items. That means width as well as the gap will be assigned to the items or between the items. Thereafter, whatever the extra space are left, yeah, keep in mind, whatever the extra space are left, then only this fr unit will work on the items. So everything has been assigned width 500 pixel and gap of 3 rem. Now whatever the extra space will be left will be then divided between these 4 items, 1, 2, 3 and 4. That's how the fr unit works. Okay, that's how you can actually size your items. That's one of the way. Yeah, perfect. Now let's see, suppose we don't want the width 500 pixel or any hard pixel, but say sometimes we may want the maybe 4th item should take the space of 2 columns, not the whole, not each and every column, just the 4th item should take the because right now we have taken the width of 500 pixel for the item 4, but what happened, it assigned the 500 pixel for each and every item inside this column. But suppose we don't want that. Yep, we want only for the fourth item it should be taking the width of 2 column, maybe fourth column also, or maybe fifth column also. So how we can do that? So in that case, here is the role of grid column or grid row. So that's how we can using yeah, so using grid row as well as grid column, we can size our items also. So first of all, let's get rid of this item 4 here. Give it a refresh. Okay, now everything is in FR. Now say for the ninth item, this ninth item should take the space of a 2 column, maybe ninth also, maybe 10th also. So how we can do that? So for that purpose, let's target the item 9, and we have a property that is grid column. So whatever the number of column you want to assign for these items, so for that purpose you can apply the value of maybe say span. How many span you want to provide, how many cell you, that means how many cell, maybe first cell, second cell, so maybe 2 cell, so you can say span 2. Save this. Now give it a refresh. Whoa, nice. So we can see here that the ninth item is now taking the space of 2 cells. That's the 9th cell and 10th cell, and after that rest of the item will be like shifted to the another columns. That's how it works. Yeah. Okay, let's apply some background to the item 9 so it can be different. Maybe background color, how we can say, maybe rose is the property, rose brown maybe. Give it a refresh. Yeah, not looking good. So here let it be. Yeah, perfect. Now save this, give it a refresh. Okay, cool. So this is our ninth item. Now say we may also apply maybe span 3. Let's see how it works. So give it a refresh, have a look, pay attention to this. Yep, you might have seen now ninth item need 3 columns because we have applied span 3, so it needs 3 shells. So and ninth item was starting from here, so after this the grid is left with only 2 columns, first and second. The third column is not available, so that's why the ninth item will come down to the next row, and there it will take the 3 cells, and these 2 cells will become empty, and thereafter other items will come, maybe after 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. That's how you can work. You can play around with the span or span 2, span 3, whatever the number of cells you want to provide to a particular item, you can do that. Similarly, you can also work on that row. So whatever the number of rows you want to assign for a particular row, a particular cell or particular item, we can also apply grid row property, and the grid row property also accept the similar values, maybe span 1, 2, 3, 4. First of all, let's apply span 1. Okay, no changes just because it is already taking the span 1 space. See, now this time span 2, save this, then give it a refresh. Okay, and one more thing, let's get our lights. Yep, so now this item 9 is taking 3 cells. How many cells it is taking? Actually it is taking 2 rows, first row, second row. Yeah, so that's how it is working with the rows also. Span 2, you may say span 3, to rephrase. Yeah, it is taking now 3 rows. Okay, here I would like to mention one more thing, that suppose I've mentioned earlier that there are few properties which belongs to the parent, there are few properties which belongs to the items, but sometimes if you may need few parent properties should be applied to the children element or to the items or to the grid item. So how we can do that? So similar to the flex box only, we can also make the grid items as a grid container, just applying display grid. For example, we have a container to which we have applied display grid, so now it is a grid container. Now say for the item 9 we also want to apply, maybe justify item center, align item center. So how we can do that? So for that purpose For the item 9, first of all we can apply display grid. So now what were the properties of the grid content we want to apply on the item 9, then we can apply here. So this item 9 is the grid item for the container, yeah, and item 9 is also a individual grid. So let's do that. Maybe place content center, give it a refresh. Okay, you can see. So now the item place content is for, let's see that, justify content and align content would be, it is our container, not container, it is item 9 here. Let's see, yeah, place content, we have align content center, justify content center. Yeah, so this is how you can make the item also a grid. Perfect. All right, now let's get back into how we can resize our items. So we have already seen that we have a grid column property, we have a grid row property, to which we can apply a span 1 2 3, whatever the number of cells you want to assign. Okay, great. Now let's say we have just created 5 columns only. Now if we say, for example, span 10, what will happen? Give it a refresh. Okay, now let's get back to our layout here and then get our grid first. You might have seen, first of all, let's get it to the black. Yeah, so for the item 9 we said take the 10 cells, span 10. So 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 and 10. So and we have also created just only 5 columns. So after the 5th column, automatically few columns will be created because the item 9 has to get 10 cells. So automatically, so now again I would like to mention here that implicit and explicit. So these 5 columns we have created explicitly by our own self, that is using this grid template column property, repeat 5 and 1 alpha. So that has been created, but these are the implicit column. Implicit means that has been auto generated. So this can happen if you apply the if you apply the grid column values or grid row values higher than the columns or rows you have created, so automatically the implicit columns will be created. Perfect. Next thing we have how we can place our items. So for placing a grid items, we have different properties, that is grid column start, grid col end, grid row start, grid row end. Alright then, now let's understand these properties one by one. So first of all, we will get rid of these all things. For the item 9, we want just a simple grid, nothing else. Yeah, with refresh, perfect. We have a normal grid with 5 columns and auto created rows, those are 4 rows. Perfect. Now let's target one item, maybe item, which item we should target? Let's target for the 14th, maybe item 14th. Say background color maybe salmon. Save this. Now let's have a look. Okay, this is the 14th item. Okay, so earlier we have used one property, that is grid column, and we have on how to do that, how to size our items, that is a span 2 1 3. Have a look. Okay, this the 14 item is taking the width of how much? 2 cells, actually 2 items. Go to here, let's have a look of 14. The item 14 is having grid column span 2. So actually this grid column or a grid row property is a shorthand property for grid column start or grid row start. I'll show you here actually. Let's open this grid column here. You can see grid column start span 2 and grid column end is auto. So this grid column is the shorthand property for grid column start and grid column end. That's what we are going to discuss now, grid column start and grid column end. So what it is saying that it is saying that, so what, from wherever you are starting this, for this item, from wherever it is starting, it will start from that point only, but it will take the space of 2 cells, that is span 2, and column end, that is auto, wherever supposed to end at there it will end. Yeah, so now let's see the grid column start. Get rid of this. Okay, perfect. Now let's use the property grid column start. What it is saying, now you can explicitly define from where you want to start your items, maybe from the first column or from the second columns or third, fourth, or anywhere you want to start, you can apply that particular value, and the values will be according to the grid lines, grid line name. So here we have grid line 1 2 3 4 5 6. So from wherever point you want to start the grid items, you can apply the value with the grid column start. Maybe we want to start from the, right now it is starting at 4th grid line. Say if you want it to start at the first column or first grid line, let's give it a refresh here. Yeah, we can see the item 14 is starting from first grid line, and here it automatically becomes empty, and then 15 16 17 and all. Yeah, okay, so this is how you can decide from where you can start your items. And similarly we have another property, that is grid column end. So this time with the grid column end, you can decide where you want this item should end. So let's say we want to end it at 4th item, 4th grid line, say 4th, save this, give it a refresh, 4th grid line. Yeah, so here we have said for this item that it should start from the grid line 1 and end up at grid line 4. So automatically it will start from 1 and span up to 4th column, actually up to 3rd column, and will end at the 4th grid line. So this is how you can decide where your item will start and where your item will end. So you can play around with these things. So actually this is like kind of flexible things. Yeah, it is flexible actually, so you don't have to worry about sometimes using position relative or absolute kind of things. But if you are using in the grid system, you can play around this. You can create columns, rows, and then you can play around that. Wherever you want to start, you can start the items, wherever you want to end the items, and you can also decide how much columns or how much sales a particular item should get. You can do all those things. Okay, we have talked about that this grid column start and grid column end is the shorthand property for grid column. So we can also define the same value with the grid column property. Okay, and the value will be, so first value will be grid column start, and then space, apply slash, and the next value will be grid column end. Okay, so this is the shorthand property for these two properties, column start and column end. Grid column start slash grid column end. So let's get rid of this, save this, then give it a refresh. No changes. That's the actual property. Okay, perfect. You can also do something like anywhere you want to start. Maybe you can start from the second item or second grid line. You can do that, and we will end at 4. And similarly you can maybe at the 5th grid line you can do something kind of this. Okay, sometimes you may want that if you don't know the actual number of columns you have, you don't know what exactly number of columns you have, and you want that your item should always start from the first line, that is first grid line, and it will always end at the last grid line. So how you can decide? Right now we know the number of columns, that is 5 columns, but say repeat auto fit maybe 150 pixel. So you don't know how many columns will be created here. Give it a refresh. You can see number of columns has been created. If you reduce the size, you can see that the columns are reducing. So you actually don't know how many columns you have. So how we can work around that? the item should always start from the first grid line, that you can do, but it should always end at the last grid line. So how we can do that? So for that purpose, first of all, let's start it from the first grid line. To be refresh, it is starting from the first grid line, and for the last grid line you can apply one value, that is -1. Okay, so the grid column 1/-1 will always start from the line 1, will always end at the last grid line. Let's give it a refresh. You can see starting from here and ending here. So if you reduce the size, it will always remain at the end as the last grid line. Okay, let's get those lines. Yeah, here is the last grid line. You can see it is always ending at the last grid line. Perfect. Similarly, you can also play around with the grid row start and grid row end. That's what we have after that, grid row start and grid row end. So for that purpose, again, you can start with the grid row start. Say the value, maybe let's say it should start from the second grid line in the row. Save this, then give it a refresh. Perfect, it is starting from the second grid line. Yep. Now we can also apply the value grid row end. Maybe we can say 5th. Let's have a look. Nice. 5th, we can also say 6th. Perfect. Okay, here we have first line, third, fourth, fifth, and it is ending at the 6th grid line. Yeah, so this is how you can play around with the grid row start, also row end. So similarly, we can also say in a shorthand grid row, and the value was 2/6. Save this. Okay, now let's give it a refresh. Same thing, no changes. Okay, cool. Now, so similar to the grid column, here we have applied that is 1/-1, which is saying that it will start from the first line and will always end at the last line. Yep. We can also apply the value maybe second -2. So how it will have, how it will work? Let's give it a refresh. Okay, it is saying that this item 14 will start from the first grid line and will end at the second last grid line. So this is the last grid line and this is the second last grid line. Similarly, we can also say third last, give it a phrase, third last or fourth last, give it a phrase. Perfect. So this is how you can work around. Okay, now let's get back to 1/-1. Save this, give it a refresh. Cool. And let's say for the grid row also 1. Perfect. And it should be also, say we want -1. Let's see how it works. No, nothing, no changes. It is not working actually. It's just because, so for the column we have implicitly created few columns, which is auto generating with this property. Yeah, repeat auto fit 150 pixel. But for the grid row, we haven't specified any explicit number of rows, so that's why it is 1/1 is not working. So we do not have explicit grid lines, so that's why it is, these are the implicit grid lines, 1 2 3 4 5. That's for the row. But if we say here grid template rows, maybe repeat 5 and maybe 1 alpha. Let's have a look, give it a refresh. Okay, we have 5 grid lines. Now get those lines, these are the explicit grid lines, 1 2 3 4. So it is starting from the first for the row, yeah, and will always end at the last grid line for the row. And these are the implicit grid lines for the row, so that's why it is not going at the end. Okay, cool. So yeah, these are the things with the grid column, grid row, You can work along with these things to place your items or resize your items inside a grid system. Sometimes you can also mix and match. Maybe you can also say for the grid column, you can say grid column should be always starting from the 1, and maybe you can also apply last how many span you want, maybe span 3. Item 14 to be rephrased. Yeah, it is starting from the first grid line, get those line, and we'll always take the how many span 3. So first, second, and 3. Similarly goes for the grid row. You can also say maybe span 2. Keep it rephrase. Yep, perfect. Great guys. So I hope you got the idea. What are the different things you can do with the for the sizing grid items using grid column, grid row, or you can also play around with the placing grid items using grid column start, column end, row start, and row end. Perfect.